Hello, world, and welcome to our podcast where two pals with different viewpoints and thoughts who really don't know much of anything fly by the seat of their pants, discussing news, politics, conspiracy theories, and much, much more. One's a genius, the other's an idiot. Or are they both idiots?
Or are they both geniuses?
You be the judge. Now, live from beautiful Central Florida, welcome to Political No Brainer. Your hosts are Zach to your right, and always right, as we know. And to your left, boy,
Coach Trippi.
yeah. We love you, Trip. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great.
Trippy, we got a good guest tonight, a dear old friend of mine
Great
from
guest.
from way back in the day.
Lieutenant Colonel, retired Lieutenant
Retired
Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Lapidow. Call him John, call him Lap. Just don't call him late for dinner. You might get shot.
Hey,
Jonathan, thank you for your service. That's near and dear to my heart, and especially a brother from back in the borough boy.
Thank
Tell
you for
us,
your service, John.
yeah,
hey,
what
That's
was
thanks,
your
Trippy.
pleasure to meet you.
how did you end up
Appreciate
going
it.
into the military? Because you were a hoodlum like I was back in the borough. We were
Oh
party
yeah,
rats out in the woods.
oh yeah. We did our, remember us with Johnson and them riding the motorcycles,
Oh yeah.
R80s, zipping through the fields.
I can
Yes,
hear it.
yes. Field parties
Uh,
and oh boy.
that was good stuff.
Nonstop fun.
Yeah, we used to get it, but yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, my old man, I didn't have much of a choice being as how my old man was 32 years in the military. So he
Wow.
actually ended up with 2 more years than I did total time, even though my dad was active duty early, but was reserves his whole career. Whereas I was active duty almost my whole career. So I joined right out of high school at first because my dad was in, and second, I just wanted to get to college at
Right.
first.
Did you end
And
up going to college?
yeah, well, I couldn't. You remember we were just talking about as we were prepping for the podcast. I wasn't great in high school, and you remember.
No, I
So
knew.
yeah, so I actually ended up. I couldn't get in anywhere, so I ended up going to county college for 2 years until I could get my grades up. I went to Middlesex, and my mom was an administrator there.
Oh,
Got
okay.
there, yeah, I got a tuition waiver, but I was in the guard anyway, so I was going for free. And then I got my grades up enough to get into Rutgers.
Oh, okay.
And then,
Oh,
yeah.
And you let the
So
GI Bill pay for that for you?
yeah, and then no, a tuition waiver paid for that, which was even better because I was in the guard in New Jersey. You got a tuition waiver to whereas money didn't change hands. It was
Oh,
just a waiver. It's a state program that Jersey, any state school, Stockton, Montclair, Rutgers, and any of the community colleges, you go for free if you're in the guard.
that's
so
awesome.
that's only New Jersey, though, right?
States have programs, but they're not all the same. And Jersey's probably one of the best with that.
That's the way it should be all around, really. But that's
We
just
well, it's
Yeah.
funny. My sister. Do you remember my sister Carla?
I do, but I don't. If I walked by her on the street, I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't notice her
It's funny.
now.
She looks just like my mom now. So,
Oh,
but
nice.
my niece, her oldest, actually was in ROTC in high school, and then opted to go ROTC in college, and then she ended up going into the army for I guess it was you got to do 4 years or I don't remember what it was, but
Yeah, there's
she
different.
went in as a lieutenant. I'm like, why did you not just stay in and retire? I mean, you had it made.
Yeah, there's a lot of options, and I always tell people at least don't get out early. Say you come on an active duty from ROTC. I ended up coming back to Rutgers and teaching as a professor at ROTC, part of the ROTC program. It was one of my assignments in the military. I just picked Rutgers, and I got me back to Jersey, so that's why I did it. But it was great. It was the best kept secret in the world. Kids would come in there, join the guard, and then go to Rutgers for free, and
Right.
then paid while they're going to school, and then get active duty, like you were just talking about your niece, getting active duty when they get out of college. If they've got a commitment of say 4 and then 2 reserve or 8 and 0, they have different levels of commitment. What you were saying before is you definitely don't want to get out early. So if you're going to get up for active duty, which a lot of people get burnt out doing, at least you stay in the guard. And when that time still runs or the reserve, and then you get a retirement later on anyway. Not an active duty one like I got but you get a guard retirement or
Right.
reserve.
Right.
That's
Did
Yeah.
nice to know. That's great
Yeah.
advice for a lot of young people out there.
It's if you're in Jersey, it's almost a no-brainer. It sells itself there.
when you
Yeah.
went in, what was your goal?
It's funny, but I wish I could. Okay, I could tell you I'm honest. My goal at that point was just going to be able to do anything else at this juncture, and I haven't planned any further. Yeah. No, my old man was high speed. He had a PhD, full bird colonel in the military. So I was going to do something with the military. I didn't know I'd get on active duty. I just basically was taking it one step at a time. I'll get into college, I'll do college. What do I like in college? And I got lucky while I was in college. I got interviewed and I got on active duty in the Guard. So it's sort of reserves, but still active duty. I was able to get on a job. It was good timing. When I got back from flight school, they needed an aviation guy.
Well, how did you, yeah, I was going to say, how did you get into flying helicopters?
That was a tough road because I joined in '89 and didn't get into helicopters until '99.
Wow.
So
Whoa.
yeah, so
Took
I
10
basically
years.
yeah, 10 years. Well, I was enlisted for 4. So all the guys out there listening, I didn't come in and do the old straight old high school to become an officer. I took the hard way because again, I wasn't the best student. I didn't have college yet. And then finally, when I finished college, I went through OCS with the military. So I had 4 years enlisted. I was almost E5. And then I went into OCS, the officer candidate school, the hard route instead of going ROTC because I went the soldier's way, they call it. In the Marines, they call that a Mustang. Yeah,
So
you go to hard school.
you flew an Apache. You
Yep, yep.
flew, well, tell us what you flew and where you flew.
I I went to flight school in 1999 January. I finished up there within the year. So at the end of '99, I was a qualified Army pilot, but just on basic Army aircraft. Then they send you to the school they want you to do. So Apache, Cobra, Blackhawk. The time they sent me straight to Cobra school. Okay. Because I was in the Guard at the time, and we were a Guard unit that had Cobras. If you were active duty in flight school, they assigned you an aircraft that you picked depending on how well you did in the school. But if you were in a Guard, you got the aircraft that your unit had. Yeah. So I went and did I went and did Cobra in Arizona. So I became Cobra qualified, but then it went away the next year and they sent me right to Apache school. So I got to do 2 aircraft within 3 years.
That's awesome.
Wow, that's interesting.
Did you see, did you go to the Gulf?
No, I 91. Uh, I was still an enlisted guy, and I was a split trainee because my senior year. So I was still in the training pipeline. I was down doing my MOS, my enlisted MOS in Alabama as a crew chief, and so I was during Desert Storm. I was still in the training pipeline. I went through basic training and my individual training in '90. So did the goal. I missed the Gulf War, the early one. I made the good one though.
Yeah.
Oh four, oh
One where we
five.
caught Saddam.
Oh yeah, yeah. I got there right after we caught Saddam, actually.
You
So
did?
you got to see a little desert action.
Oh yeah, I got to do a year. Believe it or not, I got to spend a whole year and a week straight time over there.
Wow.
Yeah, I was back then. They were sending. I shouldn't complain too much because the active duty unit before me spent 15 months straight. Can you imagine a guy kissing his wife goodbye? See ya.
Yeah,
For a
well,
15.
whole
that's,
year.
that was like my buddy was in the
Yeah.
Navy and they'd go out and he was in a battle, ship and they'd be out there and he'd never know when they were coming back.
Oh yeah, it's
But did he ever stay out a year though? That's a long time.
I'm gonna have to ask him.
that was just
He spent a lot of time in the brig, so he probably did.
yeah.
Yeah, there's no
Some
limits on the
deployments are
brig.
different. Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
some
Jonathan.
deployments are different than others. Yeah,
Yeah.
like,
So
you get like back then during the Bush Wars, you were getting a year basically for Army. Marines are like 7 months. If you're a special ops unit, you'll go over for like 2 months and come home. 2, 3 months. Yeah,
right.
more often.
And then after you got back after your year, did you stay flying helicopters or were you doing other stuff?
No, I stayed flying helicopters up until '09. Yeah, until I moved over to recruiting and retention. Because when you're a commission guy, not a warrant officer, you sort of it's you the process promotes you out basically, and you're trying to get a battalion command or a operations officer in a certain unit. So it could be a generic unit. You could go from your specialty aviation to say a recruiting or some specialty unit. And I decided to go to recruiting because my buddy was the boss there, and that's when we started the fight team, the MMA team. Yeah,
That's right. That's right. You did a little MMA,
yeah.
got in the octagon, threw around. So I guess one of my big questions is how in your career did politics get involved? Because I know you're very you're conservative. You're a 2A lover like we are. Um even though Trippy's a little on the left, he loves the
Well, I
2A.
was just
So
going to say because I think conservative and 2A go hand in hand, and I'm not necessarily a conservative, but I love the Second Amendment. Now, I've always said, and I've told Zach privately, and he probably even on the show if I look back far enough, um, you know, some responsible thinking as far as gun ownership is not a bad idea. So me and Zach were talking about the what is it, a 3-day waiting period in Florida?
it's called the 3-day
Not the
cool down.
worst idea in the world. And everybody will say, but some angry people will already have a gun permit. Well, I get it that there's problems with every control mechanism, but the control mechanisms aren't the worst thing in the world. So I am a strong advocate of the Second Amendment. I believe in owning guns. I'm not at all opposed to it. I believe in owning any gun you want if you're a responsible gun owner. So if it's an automatic weapon, if it's a hunting rifle, if it's a handgun, own it. But if you don't meet the expectations, if you don't meet if you have some mental issue, there should be some regulations. And I think often the NRA argues, and rightfully so, but it still doesn't change the argument as a whole, is you give a liberal an inch, they want a foot. You give them a foot, they want a leg. You give them a leg, they want to swing the whole, whatever. I don't know what's past the leg. They just want, and out comes, politicians that say, we're coming to get your AR-57s. We're coming to get your guns.
AR
We're going to have a weapons
15.
turning program. It
AR-15.
never takes shape in America. So don't overthink it. I mean, it's just nonsense. It's just talking points.
Well, and
No,
look, the last shooter, not the most recent one they caught, and supposedly he was actually a Republican conservative, and he just happened to forget he had his gun on him, which is ridiculous. But whatever. No, the kid who shot at the rally, that wasn't even his gun. It was his dad's. He took
it
it.
was his dad's gun. So
Yeah.
there's
So
all
I mean,
sorts of.
there's no perfect way to
Yeah,
protect the
Trippy.
law.
The thing about what you're talking about with this, give her an inch, take yard. That's a slippery. That's the good old fashioned slippery slope that happens guaranteed in any society. So
In
what?
everything, in
Yeah, and everything.
everything.
So
But
our forefathers came up with a solution for that, and it's due process. Okay, we're a country of due process. So if everything else is subjective. Whereas these days, my wife will get mad at me and say, "John's crazy." Or how about you piss your? I don't know how many times you've been married, Trippy. But if you're on your first wife, second wife, but
one and
your
only.
first, that's great. Yeah, I'm sure you might have an ex-girlfriend be like, he was crazy. He yelled at me one day. Well, you get into slippery slopes with with your regulatory and the red flags and everything else to where uh, due process is the in the Constitution where you cannot deprive somebody of liberty, property without due process, and just somebody saying he's crazy or you need a 3-day waiting period. Again, the 3-day waiting period that even say any crime done with a gun is somebody didn't even acquire a gun legally anyway. There's very rarely do you see any crime with a gun that's somebody that actually acquired it legally.
Well, so a good example. So when you say I agree 100% what you just said. I agree. So I'm not disputing. I'm bringing out another point. There was the notion that we should outlaw silencers. And the argument was, and in Orlando was the argument. Val Demings was the congresswoman that argued it. She was the chief of OPD. She was a popular chief
It's
of
in there.
Orlando Police.
Yeah.
She said if silencers were used at Pulse, more people would have died. The one thing that alerted people that there was this problem happening was the fact that the gunfire was heard. So
Mhm.
again, um, or a bump stock, which I disagree with outlawing because it doesn't really, there is no, but the idea that if you say, do you need a silencer for hunting? Do you need a silencer for recreational shooting at a range? If you take that right away, are you really violating the Second Amendment? Was there really any sort of, if you try to get some constitutional interpretation of are you violating the Second Amendment by saying silencers are outlawed? Is there
Again, it
really any precedent? Do you really think our founding fathers discussed the notion of silencers?
well, they didn't discuss. I mean, we know they didn't discuss it because it wasn't a
Right.
viable option, obviously. So yeah, it wasn't discussed per se. But again, it comes with the accessory thing, like arms are ammo is part of arms to whereas if somebody got in that was a tyrant on the left, they can't say, okay, well, I can't make guns illegal, but I'll make ammo illegal. So I get precedent's been set in the Supreme Court since the NFA. Congress has set what a weapon is. So it has gone through the people and through the legislative process of what an actual definition of a machine gun, an NFA item. Like a silencer is not. I can't just go buy it. That's an NFA item. It's like buying a machine gun. You have to go get. You have to go get a special. You got to go through the feds and get it registered when you buy a silencer. But if I'm going to be pissed off as the nightclub guy was at Pulse, whether I have a silencer or not, I'm probably still going to go shoot people. That's
Right.
not going to be the decision that's going to make me not shoot. Oh, now that I can't get a suppressor, now I'm not going to shoot anybody. So I guess,
No, I don't think
and
that's.
yeah, the thing about the suppressor, Trippy, is there are advantages too of using it. I have 8 acres. I don't have many neighbors. I do have people in my area. It's nice. In the South, people aren't used to it, especially Northeast people. People shoot all the time everywhere in the Midwest, in the South. Probably Florida doesn't have much space, but a suppressor makes my neighbors who are more than a couple acres away, but it makes them real happy. So it's very good for the neighborhoods when if you have ranges on your properties out in the country. When you're training at the range, I love it. I thank people that come in and bring suppressors. It saves my ears. Again, if you have suppressors totally, would that think you'd get a change in any numbers of crime? It's not like where the suppressors would be helpful would be if we got into the whole reason 2A is around to begin with, and that's in a little tussle with the government. So do you want, I know you don't want the government telling you, regulating what you could have if it ends up the day that you might have to use it against them, which is the whole reason for the 2A actually. So it's a real tough task to ask the government to regulate you on 2A when it's 2A is designed to go against them. That's the
Well, no,
whole point.
I actually I can't preface enough. And there's this division in America, and division and um, I guess you could just call it animosity and winner takes all politics is a real problem these days. So,
Yes.
as much as I will say this that the liberal side of the political when it comes to winner takes all, it's not really just the liberal side that uses that winner takes all approach. Both sides have engaged in if we take office, we're going to have it our way. So, is there any compromise? Is there ever any reason to believe there will be ever any compromise on anything anymore? And when you come to the philosophy that if you give a liberal an inch, they're going to want a hand and an arm and a leg, you got to come to the realization they'll never be compromised. And my whole feeling is somewhere, some way, things have to get better than they are today. Me and Zach were talking about today, and this is a part of our to do, not our to do, but somebody joined the conversation that made it a to do, that we shouldn't get personal. We shouldn't make it personal. We're attacking people's character because we don't like their policy. It's character. You can't beat them on policy, so you got to beat them on character. And and I agree. Today I said, and I've done it a lot. I've bashed the Orange Man a lot. I said, you know what? If I applied to be the CEO of Apple, would they ever look into my personal life? No. Does that chief executive officer, the biggest company in the world, have a lot of effect on people's lives? Yes. So why are we doing that to politicians? But we are. We're beating up both sides. And it's all this. There is no wiggle room on anything. It's like you said, I love people to come to my property and or next door to my property, which could be at 8 acres, could literally be nearly a half a mile over,
Yeah.
and they have silencers and you're not hearing gunfire all night. I get it. But if it could potentially save some lives, is there room for compromise?
I
Yeah.
don't think a silencer has anything to do with murder because
Only in the example I just used, and according to the Orlando chief of police, and the one-off example,
I get it.
there
No,
may be
no, no,
other
I get
examples, I
that.
don't know them, but in the one-off example I have to offer today in Pulse, it did allegedly save lives.
Yeah, it's
Well,
the problem you have to think of. It sounds insensitive, and I say it to my wife all the time in privacy of our own home. And I know we're on a podcast now, but when you're talking about the Bill of Rights, okay, amendments 1 through 10, you're talking about the level of the future of our country. Trippy's great great grandkids. You're looking out for a country of that, right? So a person, there's certain things that we as a society have come to agreement with that it's worth the risk to use. And an example I always use is a vehicle. Okay, they're very dangerous. We know that this is the number one most dangerous thing we could all do is drive a car, right? We all drive vehicles because we know as a society we've decided it's more worth getting to where we need to go in freedom than people dying on the road. So it's a risk that we have decided to take in the country. Okay, and that's just a privilege driving. That's something that's not in the Bill of Rights. When you're talking the Bill of Rights, our forefathers came up with them not so you and Trippi and John and Zak could go hunting. Believe it or not even so we could defend ourselves on the streets. It's not even close. That's such a micro level of the thinking of the strategic level of the Constitution. Whereas the only thing on our mind is our country's survival to the point where even we have people dying on the road in cars. So even though it sounds terrible, some dying from guns, which might be from other reasons, you can't blame a Bill of Right from that.
right.
It's not even the argument. You're talking about something that if you didn't have it, our country is done. A tyrant could take over tomorrow. We know what happens when you disarm countries. Trippy, I know you're sure you agree with that. So we're talking about mom comes and says my kid died from a kid shooting out of school. It's awful. I mean, wants to hear it. People die from propaganda. To go say, hey, come, no, people talk on the internet. Trump has got shot 3 times from people just spreading propaganda on the internet, which again, I'm a purist. I'm unlimited, absolute on 1A. People talking not on gets people a lot more people killed than the idea of the people being able to arm themselves against tyrannical government. And we all know what's the number one risk of every human born on planet Earth since the day humans were born. It's their own government. And our forefathers knew that. So even people dying from gun violence is not a reason to even limit or give the government more power to regulate an amendment that is designed to go against. So you can't have the people regulations to where the regulations is the Constitution is there to keep the government in check. It's not there to keep the people in check. So regulations on guns, if you think you're making regulating to save a life, onesie twosie, it's arguable you're even doing that, but I'll argue even more that the survivability of the country is way more important than that.
Yeah.
So, uh, so again, it sounds insensitive because nobody wants people dying, but he's dying because of an amendment, because they're getting a hold of weapons to kill people.
And
You
one of the
know,
things that I want to throw in is the majority, if not 100%, very close to it, of the people that are going to commit crimes are going to commit the crimes anyway. It doesn't matter if they followed the law to get their gun or they bought it off,
absolutely.
Billy Bob on the sidewalk. So, I mean, it's if someone is going to go kill somebody, they're going to do it regardless.
Oh, and Steve, Zach, another thing on this is I'm working in the gun industry. We have background checks, and Trippy knows this. Everybody in America that buys a gun at a licensed person, which i.e. gun show now too, an FFL. Anybody who buys a gun from a licensed person, not a private citizen, goes through a background check. So it's very simple. If I'm a criminal and I know I have a felony, I'm not even attempting to go get a
No,
gun.
I realize that point. The only when you bring cars into the equation, as far as the most dangerous thing we do every day is drive a car, I'll just say this: seatbelts was the same vigorous argument of is it a civil right or is it taking away a civil right or requiring people to use a seatbelt? And what happened there?
It's not mine because it's not in the Bill of Rights. You want to regulate a privilege, you want to regulate how people drive. I'm not a big fan of. I'm a libertarian, really. I'm a big fan of the government telling me anything. Don't tell me to wear a helmet. Don't tell me to wear a seatbelt. But you're talking to the wrong person when it comes to guns. I mean, I'm sorry, not gun stuff. When it comes to government, my favorite saying ever is if somebody asks, should the government dot dot dot? My answer is no.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah,
Especially with
I thoroughly agree with you. I
yeah,
do not want big government. I believe they
yeah.
are overstepping hugely.
The federal government, especially. I love my local. I love my county. My sheriff. I don't want anything higher than that.
Right.
But okay, so let's
And
just
Trippy, you know what? The funniest thing is I got pulled over one time. This is when they first started doing the seatbelt thing, right? Click it or take it back in the day. And I got pulled over and the cop's like, you're not wearing your seatbelt. I said, well, you're coming against my constitutional right. He goes, what's that? I go, freedom of movement. If I want to go through my windshield, let me. He's like, all right, you made me laugh. Just wear it next time. And he let me
Is that
go.
Hillsborough,
right.
Zach? Is that Hillsborough?
No, it was down here in
Uh,
Altamont Springs, actually. But I look, we could there's so many sides you can argue about guns. I'm an NRA certified instructor. I look, I had to go through training for that. I had to go through a class to get my CCW. They did a background check. Anytime I buy a gun and get it delivered to my FFL, he has to do a background check. So it's not like I can just willy-nilly just skip into a store. Now, I'm lucky because I'm a CCW, so I can walk into a store and buy a gun. There is a process that before I can walk out with it that I have to go through. Okay, so that's yes, and I believe that that's good. But anyone who is not a CCW, who's not been background checked by the FBI, has not been background checked because I'm looking to get my FFL actually. So that I'm a little leery about that because I don't know that I want the ATF knowing everything about me because they
oh,
come to
yeah.
my house and check everything out.
And
But
they will, by the way.
I
They're
know,
coming to
I
my
know.
range all the time.
They put it up in fine tooth comb and go through
Yeah,
everything.
gun
But
people don't vote for them, so they
no,
they harass them. Yeah, good
I
people.
but I my FFL actually is a local cop here. I love him, and but every time I go over, he's like, the routine. I say, here's my driver's license. So that leads me to another thing we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But
Well, let me ask one question, then your thing.
yeah,
Let me ask this question. Let me bring it up a notch and then we'll bring it right back down.
don't ask me, you'll kill me. Go ahead, ask me.
The 4 years Donald Trump was president, did
Yes.
you feel more free to carry a gun than any other time in your life?
It's a great question, Trippy, but believe it or not, we all I'm gonna preface this real quick with a statement. All of us, I do it too. We all think of the federal government as the people that dictate our lives every day, we don't feel the federal government. We feel local and we feel our state laws, right? So your question, to answer your question, every state regulates guns differently. Red states, you
Right.
have three states right now that you need any reason to carry a gun. Zero, no permit, no nothing,
New
zero.
York's one of them, right?
Yeah, 30 of the 50 states is
Oh, I thought you
constitutional.
said three. I'm sorry.
No,
30.
no, you're talking
Yeah.
about that can't carry guns. So that's like New York, New Jersey,
No,
California.
third. I'm sorry. It goes right now. 30 of the 50 states are constitutional carry.
Right.
So anybody could carry a gun in those states concealed. 30
Correct.
of the 50 states. Now, since the Bruin decision came out last year or the year before, no state can now ever tell you you can't have a gun and carry it concealed. You just have to go through different process for every state is different. Every state regulates guns differently. However, they cannot still violate the Constitution. So uh, there's not a state that if you apply that, if you're not a felon, you can't carry now
Right.
Well,
because
but there is
yeah.
that crossing state line issue still out
Yeah,
there.
well, that the Congress would have to address that because it's a reciprocity issue. The
Right.
same way they did with driver's license, basically. Like if I'm a Jersey driver's license, I could drive to PA. Well, now since the Bruin decision and everybody carrying a gun in every state's legal now, that they're gonna have to, Congress is just gonna have to come together and say, whatever, even though but the problem is every state regulates things different. Like Jersey's traffic laws aren't much different than Pennsylvania's. Maryland's aren't traffic laws aren't much different than Jersey's. But in North Carolina, I could walk down the street with an AR-15, a short one, strapped across my chest. Where if I even owned that gun in New Jersey, I'm going to jail.
Right.
So it's
Do
you
you
can't.
remember, hey, John, do you remember when hollow points were illegal?
Yeah, well, they are. If you don't get polymer filled, they're still illegal in Jersey.
In Jersey? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that was on The Sopranos. He got popped with
Yeah,
hollow
if you don't
points.
get them,
Whereas that's
if
the
you
only thing
get
I carry.
yeah, if you get spear gold dots like I have, because
Yeah.
I go to Jersey all the time, just get their polymer filled. That is the loophole per se. They're still hollow points, but they're polymer filled. They looks like a rubber in them.
Yeah.
Oh, I've actually seen those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
you were bringing up the
so
next
let me ask your
topic.
question. Let me answer your question. I've had my CCW for close to 20 years, and it doesn't matter who president is. I've always carried
Yeah,
and never had a
that's
problem.
where I was getting to. Actually, you're
Yeah.
right. I forgot that Trippy. I sort of went off on a tangent, but yeah, Steve, Zach reeled that back in. The president doesn't even have the power per the Constitution to have any say in any citizen's guns.
Right.
That's just
So
Yeah.
where the
yeah,
friction so
So the
where the
argument,
friction began, as far as what we all just agreed on,
it's
in
your states,
COVID,
your
there was
states.
the argument, and I've always said Democrats screwed the pooch when it came to handling COVID. They were really hammering into people's lives. You have to wear a mask. You can't gather at church. You
Oh,
can't
don't get
see
me
a
started on
concert.
that. Yeah,
And it was ridiculous. And in New
100%.
York, it got so bad that they were literally saying the people that are, what did you call it? Quarantining in
yeah.
in big buildings were breathing recycled air, and they were getting sicker than the people that were actually going out and about walking in the parks. And these points were brought to New York officials, and they argued you have to quarantine. They stood their ground on this crap. And it
So
was the
my
governor of New York at that moment in time who, at that point, the COVID period, who was arguing with Trump. Trump said, I'm going to make it so nobody can demand you quarantine, so nobody can demand you have a vaccine. And it was
Yeah,
the governor of New York who said, there are no kings in America. We're
he's
50
correct.
governors.
Yeah, he's
and
correct.
So the
he's
Democrats have
absolutely right. And I
often
had no problem with that argument either.
no, and what I'm saying is we all agree, but I'm not arguing the point of the Second Amendment. I'm just saying, is it really has it ever been? It's become such a forefront issue. gun ownership, and is it really something? I just think it's a talking point for every politician. I
Right. And
think
it's
Kamala
stupid
Harris
because these
started on it.
politicians keep saying they want to get
Yeah,
rid of it and they
especially
can't.
Trippi's Bruin decision. I follow FPC, which is Firearms Protection Coalition. They're the NRA on steroids when it comes to lawsuits. Since the Bruin decision, they can't even regulate a 10-round magazine anymore.
Perfect.
Every regulation's getting overturned. I forward a lot to Zak on Instagram.
Yeah.
Every I'm telling you, you can't even tell Jersey can't even tell somebody where they can carry. No, you can't tell when it comes to the Bill of Rights. And now that 2A was confirmed with Bruin, you can't regulate a Bill of Right at all. It comes down to everybody uses that bull crap argument. You can't yell fire in the theater, which is that's not even content of speech, that's an action. But you a Bill of Rights very tough to go and over regulate. And that brings us back to the slippery slope uh, discussion that we got before regarding you could come back to the Fourth Amendment getting wrecked by the Patriot Act when we all thought it was good. So
And
you can't get anything into a slippery slope because someone's going to eventually take advantage of
They put the Patriot Act into place after 9/11, right?
it. Yep. And we all thought same thing like after a shooting, regulate. Okay, let's see
but
if
you know the
that works
Patriot Act's
out.
still in effect.
Yeah.
Yes, they almost got rid of it. I think it don't quote me, but I think last House session it got they went to knock it down and they lost the Republicans.
Right, but you also know uh, Eric Snowden or Snowden is still living like a house cat in Moscow.
Yeah.
And if there was any addressing the validity of who opened our eyes about the Patriot Act, it may have very well been a lot of him. And the
Oh
fact
yeah.
that he's in hiding in Moscow and he's afraid to leave his own home because he's afraid there's a U.S. agent ready to scoop him up, knock him out, and say he voluntarily got on a plane back to America. Um, so when we talk about whenever we go into a political conversation, when we say one party's better at something than another, I just argue that point adamantly. I have never seen effective governing in America in my life. And as much as I like certain policies, there is, I'm just throwing it out there again. I know we don't want to just beat the dead horse about Donald Trump, but there is this emotional connection to Donald Trump, or we're even alluding to the fact that he was the only effective president. And people say, stop making it emotional. I'm like, I'm not. I'm arguing policy.
Yeah.
I'm arguing there's effective and ineffective. I have said some horrible things about him. And I realized today, I said, if you apply to be the CEO of Apple, just like I said before, you're not dragged through this dragnet of personal and character assassination. And that again, I say the Democrats should hold the mantle high on character assassination of public figures. It all started with Judge Robert Bork. Ronald Reagan
Oh,
nominated Judge Robert Bork, and the Democrats assaulted him verbally in Congress to the point where he was the only person not confirmed to the Supreme Court, the only judge not confirmed. And it's literally now a word in the Webster
yeah.
Dictionary. It's called borking.
Yep.
And
Yeah, it's a verb.
then
It's a
they did the
verb
same
now.
thing to Clarence Thomas, and their issue with him was, and it's sad that it is the core essential issue they had with him, is he went to school to be a priest,
Didn't they go
and that
after
was their issue with him.
didn't they have to
He
go
didn't
after Ollie
complete
North the
school,
same way?
but
They
that
don't
was their
like the
issue with him. And then they
they're
did it
not
to Brett Kavanaugh.
Right?
So I
Didn't they
think it
do it
needs to
to Ollie
stop,
North too?
and I realized that today it needs to stop.
yeah, it's well, we know that the stereotypes, the left doesn't like religion, and that's you get they like I feel bad for Christians right now. They get
But I
destroyed.
don't. They have no. I don't know that they. I do know a lot of left people that are avid, dedicated Catholics, and I always say, I've made this point that, the rule was a Jesuit could never be Pope until a Jesuit became Pope. And that's because the last Pope was so conservative that there was a feel like we're going to lose too many Catholics. We're going to bring it down a notch. We're going to open our minds a little. There's room for that. There is
Well,
some room for
you
that.
know,
I love religion. I love my relationship with Jesus Christ. He's my Lord and Savior. But some things I just can't get a grip on. And Zach and I have had that argument. Not so much on the
no,
show, but privately.
never, never. Hey, so let me ask you a question. You brought up a very good point. And I think the coin has two sides. There are people who just absolutely like worship Trump like he's almost a god, which is kind of silly. And but then you got the other side who literally wants him dead. So that's why we call that Trump derangement syndrome. And I think you could
Yes,
call it Trump love syndrome on the other side. Look, I like the guy. I've always liked him. I thought he was great for America because what he did, he came in as a not a politician. And boy, howdy, they proved that point because they went after him with a vengeance.
They
Like
did.
even people who loved him like want to destroy him now. And your wife sneaking out of the room. She could have said hi.
yeah, I was my power cord. You see, you caught that. That was a good move. Yeah,
That's all right. But
yeah, there we go.
I just am baffled. I was watching some Charlie Kirk today, who he's great. I love
Yeah,
him.
he is great, by the way. He's great.
And this guy, he asked flat out, why are you voting for Kamala? Please tell me. He wasn't trying to fight the guy, he was just asking him. And the guy's like, he's like, well, because she's not Trump. He goes, okay. What policies? Well, I don't know. Well, what did she do? Well, when she was a lawyer, he goes, no. As vice president, what policies do you love that she's going to bring in as president? Tell me why I should vote for her. Well, because he's not Trump. That to me is ignorance. And
So
that was
you
the
want
point.
Absolutely.
you
So I
you
was
want
trying
to
to
know
get
why
that.
I vote for Kamala? I just want to say, when you're ready,
No,
say, go
no,
ahead.
no, I'm not ready yet. Relax.
Right.
Because I know you're retarded. That's why. No, listen. If you can come back with policies and what she's going to do that she has said and it's a proven fact and she's going to stick to it, because you are the first to admit that Trump has been the best president that ever stuck to his promises.
He stuck to a higher average of promises, but for the most part, they were promises he shouldn't have stuck to.
But it doesn't matter. He stuck to a promise,
He
right?
did, and I
If
agree.
if
So
I
let me not
promise to
take
pick up
out
your
the
kids,
caveat.
if I promise to
He
pick
did
up your
have a higher
kids,
average of sticking to his promises
right,
than
right.
any other president.
But if I promise to pick up your kids and I do so, then I'm a good guy. If I promised I'm not going to put ketchup on my French fries, you don't freaking care, right? So, but it's still I kept my promise. So a
Yeah.
promise is a promise. That's my opinion.
I just want to articulate what I agree with you on.
I don't
I agree
articulate.
with the average that he's much higher average of sticking with controversial promises than any other president,
Right,
than any other presidential candidate.
right. Because he was not a politician.
But that
He
has
was a
all changed
businessman.
since.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what
Yeah,
happens
this
when he
one.
gets back in the Oval Office.
If the I don't know, it's the irony or the weird thing about the left is Trump is he's by far not the most conservative president we've
Not at
had.
all.
Um, the last like four, he's not even close to the most conservative last four Republicans.
Thank you.
He was a New York liberal, liberal Republican, and he was a Democrat for a little while.
Thank you.
Well,
I mean, the
I
guy,
saw him in an interview where he said they asked him. I think Oprah was interviewing him. She said, "Would you ever run for president?" He said, "I would.
yeah,
I don't want to, but I would, and I would run as a Republican because they're dumb and they'd vote for me." And it's
yeah.
hilarious because we did. But I think what I really see about him, and I know you think it's a big show, Trip, but I truly believe he has a heart and love for America.
I'm sure he
Okay,
does. He's done very well in America. His love for America is the fact that it's the greatest place in the world to prosper. We call it the lucky gene pool.
but who
And
cares?
he prospered, and that's a beautiful thing. And he put it all on the line to be president. But the
Right.
issue is I am not
Even
the
his
one
kids have said he should
arguing.
retire and just sit,
But
he
I
could
am
go
not the
off to
one
the
that
sunset.
argues the personal note. I'm the one that argues the policy note. I was just saying, when you're ready for that, I'm ready to respond to that.
Right. And I'll let you know.
We'll get it. So before we get to the policy note, I'll go one more thing, Trippy. And Zach, I don't know if you knew this either. I met Trump in '09. He came to, I was in military at the time, and his Colts neck, it was Flag Day. It was June 14th and 14, actually. And seven of us, it was myself and six enlisted guys, put a flag up and right off, you know what I'm talking about, off of 1834. He had a brand new, beautiful golf course that he opened up, and it was Flag Day, which is also coincidentally his birthday.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, and we went in, and tell you what, this is before. I mean, of course, he talked about running for president, but this is back in '09. When that got before he arrived, the staff was running around just doing things, just order almost we were impressed because we're military guys. And then we look, he's coming. When that walked into the room, there is no doubt any time, any place, who's in charge.
Right.
When that gets into a room, I don't care if it's his attorney, if it's at the UN, if it's at something overseas, it's in charge when he walks in a room. Nobody else is.
He was one of the guys, and I know, Jeff, you said it was disrespectful or whatever, but like when he was one of the summits, and he kind of pushed the other prime minister out of the way because he needed to be
I
in
love that.
front, and or when he tapped on the sheik's shoulder, which nobody's supposed to touch the prince, and the
Yeah,
prince smiled because he was like, yeah, that's the boss right there.
I
And
love that.
everybody, that's what I liked because he commands so much respect. and
Exactly.
and the way I've never met him. I've never been in a room with him, but from people I've talked to, when he walks into a room, like you said, everybody has told me the same thing. That's the man.
He is large and in charge, and if he represents your country, whatever he about again, we're still talking the personal side, Trippy. Ego, ego is not always a bug. It's also a feature to be an American president and have a semblance of an ego, because his ego is what drives him to compete. Like Zach just said, the guy could be on the beach right now for the last 20 years with three blondes and more and mai tais. He wants to win. He wants to make things better. The guy, he's competitive, and his ego is a feature for the American people. They should be complaining about it. They should be loving it. He gets a little obnoxious with stuff. And if you're a traditional, and I happen to be a traditional presidential guy, I like president stuff, but the battlefield has changed a little bit. What Trippy was referring to earlier, we're at a time where there's not much legislation going on between both sides. So you the times have created Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't create the times.
Right.
Times
I
Well,
agree.
here's the
created.
thing. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna say here. Okay, Kamala Harris policy. Let me just start there.
All right, jump in with your
She
policy.
made a campaign promise. No telling if she can keep the promise. No telling if she even has any intention of keeping the promise. Most you'll
Mhm.
spend on prescription drugs. The most anybody will spend on prescription drugs is $2,000 a year. I'm looking at the barrel of a new prescription for my eye that's been a pain in my neck for 20 years now at $700 a month. That's
Right.
$8,400 for one prescription, and I have about 7 prescriptions for this eye. It's a good promise. I love the initiative. I love the fact that even if you just start as a candidate talking about it, sooner or later it might gain some traction. But Donald Trump is the guy that tried overturning the ACA, and I've always said the ACA is they incorrectly wrote the acronym. It shouldn't be the Affordable Care Act because so many people are arguing it's not affordable. But what it should have been is the Available Care Act. If you're in dire straits, you get diagnosed with a brain tumor, and you just have no insurance. You've been working at gig work, Ubering or Uber Eats. You have no insurance. You can enroll and get an insurance policy based on your age and your gender. not the fact that you can't get a policy because you have an untreatable brain tumor. Personal life experience. I had a regular at a bar I worked at who was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor before the ACA. He had to sell everything. It took months because the only way he could afford Medicaid, the only way he could get enrolled in Medicaid is by having no assets. It's a clear issue we had in America. And when a president comes along and works hard to keep that promise, when in fact everybody told him this is a destructive decision, if it's made, the whole healthcare system will collapse because it's become so inner workings have become so involved with the ACA and how our healthcare system has changed over time. So that's an issue I have with him being a president for another term.
Yeah, okay.
So when we talk about a guy that walks in a room and he is a force, he is a presence, I get it. As a businessman that works, you walk in a room with 20 potential investors and you convince them all to invest, you've done a great thing as a businessman. But when you're a president, you're not 20 people in the room no more. The whole world is watching. Experts in every field are watching. Individuals with opinions are watching and listening and have no stake in whether it gets done or not, but they're still watching, listening, and forming opinions. And that's when you put yourself in that Klieg light that becomes extremely destructive to your character when you have enormous character flaws and enormous business dealings that can follow you back from time and haunt you. So that's the position he put himself in. It's not personal. It is things we do know about him that we seem to bring up as issues.
Generally, you guys are saying he wants to dump the ACA. The last thing is he just wanted to get rid of the requirement, which I get you guys called a tax, we called it a what the tax, quote unquote.
No, we didn't call it a tax. Actually, John Roberts, the U.S.
Yeah.
Supreme Chief Justice,
okay.
he wrote it as a tax because as a penalty it was not constitutional.
Yeah, okay, you're
so
right.
he reverted the word.
Now that's what I know is they're trying to get rid of that. Okay.
It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
That's
Congress
good.
got rid of it.
Yeah. So, but the Congress, you just brought up the magic word. Trump wouldn't get rid of something that Congress doesn't come up with a plan as a replacement, or at least more privatized. Republicans just don't like the federal government, the feds running stuff. We'd rather have private or more local. So if we could come up with a plan, an effective system that Congress could legislate, but it comes back to your point, could they talk anymore? But it's not really the president. He doesn't come with a plan. His job is just to endorse or not endorse. It's really that's for Congress to come up with. So come up with a great plan, and I'm for it. You know, I want you to whatever way is the best for you to get your stuff that is the most efficient. That's not run top. I don't like centralized top down stuff. So if it could be privatized or they could come up with a program, I'd be up for that. But
Well, let
again,
me
I don't know
ask
if
you,
that's so much Trump or is the Congress.
That was his initiative.
didn't
One of the first things he wanted to do as president was repeal. And they asked him, what's to replace? I don't know. We'll get to that. That was really
repeal and replace. He said repeal and replace.
right, but there was no replace. The only thing on the legislative agenda for the vote was repeal, and then we'll cross the bridge of replacing.
Yeah,
it was
well,
a concern.
But they didn't do anything.
No, they missed by one vote. But if it went into effect, it would have been disastrous for a lot of people.
Well, you don't have that. I mean, would you think they would have just transitioned to something worse? I don't know.
Well,
Again,
let me ask you though. Didn't your beloved Sleepy Joe say that he wanted to do the same thing with the medicine?
With what?
Medicine prices for prescriptions.
Yeah, and insulin.
Well, he did. He in the Build Back Better, which ultimately became the Inflation Reduction Act, there was a part of the bill, a piece of the bill, and this is an interesting point you brought up, that allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices for elderly. So what happened is, and Republicans argued it, and it was Mitch McConnell who said, now that you've literally tied the arms behind the backs of private drug companies, you're going to limit new treatments. You're going to limit research and development of new drugs. And there's a fact there because American pharmaceutical companies do most of the heavy lifting when it comes to pharmaceutical research, and then China steals all the patents.
Yeah.
Well,
But if you're going to argue the point that by letting Medicare negotiate drug prices is the problem, then what is the resolution? Well, is it doing what Joe Biden did, allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices, or is it just say do nothing and a lot of drugs are unaffordable to people?
well,
And he
let me throw my
also
point in.
mitigated the price on insulin for diabetes.
Well, let me throw this in there. The reason, I had trouble with the Affordable Care Act. All right. So when Lorianne took the year off and I was working as 1099, I had we had to get affordable care because we were going to get dinged when we did our taxes. They said we had to. So I got it, and I was on a medicine called Jardiance for diabetes. And this is when I was way bigger, and obviously it was part of my health that's why I was on it, and I fixed it. But because they did not accept the Affordable Care Act insurance, it would have been $683 a month for 30 pills. $683.
Right.
I actually found a way through my doctor. He said, let the company know. I let the the pharmaceutical company know that made the medicine. This is what's going on. They needed proof. I showed them receipts. The pharmacy said, no problem. We'll give you receipts, whatever you need. And so they gave me a year's supply for absolutely nothing.
Right.
Because they didn't accept the insurance. So I find that very fishy, if you ask me.
There's a lot of fishy business, but there's 2 points to that. One is, like I said, Kamala Harris was going to limit it or proposes to ultimately, I don't know if she'll keep the promise or even ever become president, $2,000 a year out-of-pocket expense for all prescription drugs for an individual, which would be incredibly big for me. The other thing is about the Affordable Care Act that's been argued over and over again is it's based on the outlines of Medicaid. So let me tell you the difference between Medicaid and Medicare. Aid is for poor people, care is for elderly. Medicaid is crap. And by aligning the Affordable Care Act with Medicaid is what limits most doctors not even wanting to touch the coverage. But it's been proposed that it be realigned with Medicare, and it would open up the floodgates, and it would relieve the concerns you have that you had. And there's a lot of fixes about the Affordable Care Act that have been proposed but have been shot down for two reasons. And it's the Republican Party and it's the Democratic Party, because both parties wanted it to fail for two reasons. One, the Affordable Care Act gives people the freedom of mobility. You no longer have to depend on a big employer for your group plan. So you could tell your big employer, like 90% of Twitter employees told Elon Musk, jump in a lake, buddy, because you could have been sitting at home gaining 900 pounds and you could still get your medication without his coverage.
Right.
Democrats wanted to fail because they're hip on the idea of universal health care, which is not going to work in America. It's not going to work in America.
No. That's bad news.
So by making the culprit the Affordable Care Act, when in fact it's a blind way of looking at it, instead of looking at who's trying to ambush and sabotage and destroy it routinely, take the ownership of both parties and realize it's just like you said, there's a lot of fishy business in medical care in America.
Yeah. And the guys in government, what's happening now is the bureaucrats in government are moving into the top guys at the CEOs. They're moving back and forth. So you have guys that are working for, say, Procter Gamble, Kellogg's, all the big companies. There's only 8 food companies right now, and then they're moving in. They're retiring, moving into government, working in the FDA, and they're improving their own buddies' credit
and being lobbyists.
Right.
Yeah,
and you know why the Democrats and the Republicans wanted it to fail is because they're all getting their pockets lined from these pharmaceutical companies.
Exactly. The pharmaceuticals are paying everybody.
Right.
It's
you know how the word lobbyist came about?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Jeff.
The term or the title lobbyist meant you stood in the lobby for hours waiting to get in a room and listen to what Congress may or may not do. So now they have line standers, homeless people stand in line for them, and then call them when they're across the street in a fancy restaurant. Call them when their turn is coming up to get in the room. The lobbyist walks over to the line, takes the spot, and pays the homeless person to be there. That's how they stood in lobbies. That's how they became lobbyists. Lobbyists have become what controls America, not politicians.
Yeah, it's really we're too decent. We should be decentralized now, i.e., as per Jefferson, we're really more centralized. You've the government right now could about 8 oligarchs run everything. You got Bezos, you got Gates, you got the food companies, you got Apple. Basically, 8 emails, and you could cut off America. You could
Like you
cut
said,
off
there's
half.
probably only 8 food companies left.
Say again,
There's
Jimmy?
only about 8 food companies left in America.
Yeah, if you look at I saw it online. There's a model. It was like offhand. It was like I know Procter and Gamble was one, but
Monsanto.
there's about 8 companies that run basically all the food. And then you've got, of course, the government's controlling the meat and the dairy. So
Right.
you got a real issue now of the lack of self-sufficiency and a very centralized government. We're oligarch system. We're almost looking like the Soviets did in the coming in the 80s.
I saw a video the other day, and I want to say it was in Pennsylvania. It might have been Ohio, but it was Amish guys that had a food stand, and they were selling raw milk, and the government came up and made them dump it
Oh yeah,
out.
they don't want any of that. And again, you can get into conspiracy theories. You see it come across online, like the meat place is burning, the chicken place is burning. Again, I'm not going
No,
to get into all the conspiracy stuff on that, but
Oh, we love conspiracy theories. We love
yeah,
oh,
sitting
we
down
that's
love
those
them.
rabbit
But
holes.
you
yeah,
know,
that's
just on the food point, you ever do you remember the Arab Spring, the Arab uprising? Do you know how that all started? It all started in Tunisia. A fruit stand was told he couldn't be on the one side of the street where they actually do business. He was told he had to be on the other side of the street. So he doused himself in gasoline and lit himself on fire. And that's how the Arab Springs began, and it went on for years. There was a lot of to the point where even Saudi Arabia was concerned about losing their kingdom, so they started giving people money to quell the violence and the uprisings. That
yeah.
could when you talk about food as being an issue or a controlling issue of government, it's not government, it's a lobby. Warren Buffett combined Kraft and Heinz. He took 2 food companies and made them one and brought them into his own ownership with one other investor, 3G, a Brazilian investment company. But yet, and that's a point to make over and over and
So
over.
how's that not a monopoly?
It is.
Oh, do you
But
remember?
monopolies were addressed only under one administration, and it was a Democratic administration. And that's when they broke up AT&T
Yeah.
40.
No, do you remember in was it the 70s, John, or was it the 80s when we had Ma Bell and then all of a sudden it all broke up and
Yeah,
That
now
was
there's
the
just no.
AT&T breakup.
yeah,
But
that was
every
the breakup.
time you hear about their sanctioning Google or they're sanctioning Apple, it's just a $200 million fine to Google is like me
Oh,
throwing a $20 bill out. But probably not even that ratio there. It's twenty
yeah,
dollars.
it's probably worse than that. But yeah, that's they're gonna have to start to it. The problem is it comes back to the argument that Trippi brought up earlier, is until the two sides are like if you think back to Reagan with Tip O'Neill being a Democrat, him being a Republican, and them all talking, until the two sides get in Congress and actually get along, you're not gonna get you're not going to, they're going to always bully pulpit each other when it comes to, say, the Republicans want to go break up Google. The Democrats are going to say no. And you're just going to get that nonstop now in Congress until they're getting along because they're not, there's no bipartisanship at this
There's
juncture.
none
Yeah.
whatsoever. The one piece of bipartisanship was a whole other subject. Is the Ukraine bill and the Ukraine aid package, and they were talking about removing Speaker Michael Johnson for letting it get a vote on the floor. They were talking, and they had already removed Kevin McCarthy for something. You're eating your own now. You're
That's it. Well,
literally
there,
eating your own now. That's where we're at in America. It's
yeah,
so
it's
when we
Well, did you not see it like at the DNC, the alleged liberals, the pro-Palestine and everything, they're running up on stage and I mean, I'm like everybody's eating each other. It's just there's no there's no
well,
loyalty. We talk about loyalty a lot. don't we, Jeff? And I am a huge fan of loyalty. I mean, from Jersey, it's inbred in you. It's in
Well,
your
I'm loyal to
blood.
people I know and love. I'm not loyal to politicians.
No, but I'm loyal to my country.
Well, and there again is this is how this whole conversation is sort of culminating is there any politician loyal to America or are they out for themselves? And
I
sometimes
don't
I
think
get the
so.
feedback Trump's loyal to America. And I'm like, wait a minute, calm down. Because I've seen a lot of things Trump's done for himself on his presidential watch.
He
So
didn't. He
I'm
didn't
not
take
so
a
sure.
paycheck. Or what? The funny thing is, he didn't take a paycheck. He donated and again, I know that's a drop in the bucket for him, but they almost broke him down to where he was. He didn't have a lot of cash up, but now he's back up to about 7 billion. Yeah, but he, he was he's dropping a lot of money on this campaign, and it's costing him all on his money. So he didn't take a paycheck. The guy, he could have been retired 25 years ago. I mean, everybody loved him 25 years ago. Jesse Jackson, he was hanging out with all those guys, going to
He
fights.
was in every rap video.
He was in every rap video. Everybody who hates him now loved him then. Hollywood loved him. He was in movies. The guy could have retired and been loved, but he did not like. He even told Oprah that. And Zach, you brought it up earlier about he was on Oprah on that one episode. He said, "If they really need me, I'll do it." And that's what he's saying again on this campaign. To where he is, I don't know if he's really telling the truth on that. Trump has that little fib stuff that he likes doing. He's saying that he wouldn't have run again. Biden didn't fit up so bad. So he might be saying that, but he might not. But in any event, but the guy, what's he, what is he gaining by doing this?
Well, I don't know. I know what he's gaining. I know what he's lost. If he never ran in the first place, which is something Bloomberg did, he realized this isn't a good idea and he dropped out, quit. He ran, he put himself in a position where everything he was just this kind of footloose and fancy free guy with the law and order type thing. There is issues that are documented with paper trails that he is legally going to be or may be held accountable for. So now I feel like the reason he's running for this term is to sort of because if he doesn't run and if he didn't run and he doesn't win and we don't know what's going to happen, he's in a big heap of doo doo. I mean, Kamala
that thing's
Harris.
gone. That appeal might his New York case might be gone on appeal by the
New
time he's
York's
done.
not the biggest issue he has. The
Oh,
Georgia
he's not
case is
getting
pretty
any
big.
none of them. I'll bet you now, zero. None of that's going to be a stick.
Nothing's gonna.
Just
I don't
just
ever
like, hey,
see him
look,
going to prison.
I hate to say it, but I think the Biden crime family is gonna probably get away with it all too. I mean, look at the
Yeah,
Everybody gets away with everything. There was
I
right.
something
don't
on.
think Trump's going to go after Biden, to tell you the truth. I don't think he's going to go after Hillary. I don't think he's going to have to go. He's going to go after Biden. But I'll tell you what he should do. Pardon Hunter. He did that.
That would be funny.
He's funny as hell. If he pardons Hunter, he'd be like, News, what the hell?
They
I'd
wouldn't even
love
know
to
what to
see
do.
that
You
clutch.
would like Rachel Maddow would probably just her head would
Yeah.
explode on TV.
I mean, that is a great idea. But you know what I said was a great idea? I said after he got shot, and I said that's terrible. I do not want to see that. I never wanted to see that. I never said it was a great thing.
Right. No,
I
I don't
said
want to see
rather
him.
than go to a rally or go right from that shooting to the RNC convention, said he should have went to Congress like Ronald Reagan did. Because I always said the one thing that gave Ronald Reagan a voice early on in his presidency, he was like a drunk puppy. But the one thing that gave Ronald Reagan a voice is after he got shot, he went to Congress and it was a standing united ovation and he used it correctly. But Trump, he should have went to Congress. He should have called Mike Johnson. That's who sends the invite and said, let me speak to America. It's time. And he could have played his cards better. But he went to the RNC and he went on his own little tangent that he typically does. He goes off speaking notes and he didn't do himself any favors.
Maybe
And
you
I
should
think
go
there
work
was a
for
lot of
him.
room for him to do. Lindsey Graham phrased it best. He picked up the phone and told him, "You fucked up your presidency." He did. There was a lot of things he did wrong, and that's a lot of the reason I would never support him. I didn't support him the first time, and like Kamala said very eloquently, I was one of the 81 million people that fired him the last time. and I won't support him this time. There's too
What
many
what
mistakes.
specifically? I haven't heard anything that we had the best economy in 2018. We legitimately had the best economy comparatively to the history of almost in the history of the world.
But
As
generally
compared,
speaking,
yeah.
and I know you're going to argue this point, but that is assumed to be ridden on the coattails of Obama's policies. The only economic policy that he passed, the only thing that had an economic effect was the tax cut. And
Well,
it didn't,
that's huge, by the way. That
it was huge, but we
the
can't afford it.
deregulation, that's huge for job growth
So
and
before the Trump tax cut, the biggest tax cut in America was the Reagan tax cut. The fact of the matter is, back then, like you said, there was unity. There was an understanding of
Tip
bipartisanship. And they
O'Neill.
came
Yeah.
to a quick realization that we couldn't afford the tax cut. And they passed numerous tax increases that all hit Ronald Reagan's desk. And he signed them all into law that completely offset his tax cut. And
Yeah.
the same thing's happening now. The $1.5 trillion tax cut that went to corporate America was for company. First of all, the first thing about the tax cut, like I said, when you say I don't have an issue with them, the corporate side of the tax cut was permanent. The personal side was temporary. I call bullshit on that decision. Should have been permanent all across the board or temporary all across the board. But to make the corporate side permanent and the personal side temporary was wrong. But we are in a position now where we can't afford the tax cut. They keep talking about now they're talking about raising the capital gains to cover the enormous skyrocketing deficits. Often people say, "Well, we're sending $60 billion to Ukraine." Well, we've also said Trump was no populist. I mean, we sent an enormous amount of money to Saudi Arabia when he was president under the guise of foreign aid. I don't
But we
think they
got
need.
something back from the Saudis, though. We got a lot of stuff back. We got oil.
We
We
didn't
had
buy the oil. They got military aid that they are financing that
and
they should
they
have
bought a
cash.
lot of stuff from us too. They bought our jets. So Ukraine is just they're sort of a welfare case where Saudi it was mutually beneficial.
For the most part, Ukraine's going to repay the debt unless they lose the war.
You hear
That's
that?
been
Zach,
established.
Ukraine's going to pay their debt back. That and 50 cents will get you a cup of coffee.
No,
50
there's
cents,
there's
man.
seized
I don't know
assets
where
from
you're
Russia,
shopping
which
for
they're
coffee.
talking about converting to debt repayment. And they're going to come back as a viable economic force, and it has
They're
been.
they're losing the war right now, Trippy. You know, they had no chance.
Well, some people say they have a big chance, and some people say they have no chance. I'm not going to argue with a military guy on what chances they have. I'm not even going to open that flood. I don't have an
Again,
opinion.
I don't know. I don't have any more intel than you do on that, but just from a lot of the reports I had, and again, I listen to a lot of the guys that are that have Tucker's Jennifer Griffin. There's a lot of people that have that inner working with the Pentagon, and they're saying they know that Ukraine doesn't have the feasibility or capabilities at this point to even do anything. They could do an incursion in, but Russia's just got almost unlimited. I know they've lost a lot of guys. Every needless death over there, but it's going to be a stalemate to nothing gained until Trump gets in and actually stops it. Because I believe right now this administration's benefiting from the good old two-way launder system by sending the most corrupt country in Europe unchecked billions of dollars. The whole reason Biden was over in Ukraine in the first place, Obama sent him over because it's the most corrupt country on earth. That's the whole reason they were never in NATO. We're even beholden to send them money. So by them not being NATO. So again, just you're hearing these alarmists saying that if Putin takes Ukraine or the parts back that he wanted, he's going to keep going and take NATO countries. No way in hell he's going to do that. It's a
Well, no,
scare
he's not
tactic.
going to do that because we've proven his army to be ineffective. But
Exactly. He's going to do that. Yeah.
Trump's proposal to end the Ukraine war is to stop the aid. The aid is done. Everybody, it could be Kamala Harris as president, Tim Walz as president. Congress is not going to approve any more aid. It's
They
not
just
going to
sent
approve
over,
any
I think
more
they
money.
just sent over another 60
And
billion.
that's not going to stop the war because Europe's going to continue to give him whatever he needs.
Now Europe's not giving him a lot though.
They're going to have to pick up the pace because
I think that Trump's going to get in and he's going to art of the deal it. I'm telling you that I personally think, and this is my opinion, that they would even gotten Trump if Biden wasn't inserted in 2020. If Trump's president, we wouldn't even talking about this right now.
I don't know that they would. Trump had a deal with Russia, but it's one you can't rely on. You
Well,
can't
it was
trust
a
Russia.
pipeline. Russia didn't have the money until Biden turned on that Keystone, not the Keystone, that was the turn off. That was when he turned off our fuel. Forget that one. When he turned off our own fuel, the Keystone pipeline, he turned off the Gulf Stream. The Russia, Trump had Putin's pipeline shut down. Biden allowed him to open it back up. And I can't remember the exact
That was the one
pipeline
in
name.
Nordica.
Yeah, no, yeah. And
The
then
Nautica
so
was bombed, and Putin
no, no,
has.
no, no, no. We're talking. This is the one, not the one that was underground that day that got blown up. It was the one that was inactive, and then when the Biden administration got in, they allowed Putin to turn it on, and start getting resources again and revenue from the oil. Don't I'm gonna Google it. You got to Google the name of it, but it was a no. I can't remember the name of the pipeline, but that allowed Russia to have the resources now to actually go and execute such a big operation. They didn't even have the money to do it beforehand.
Well, I'm not. I don't know what they had money for because it's just like they're saying Russia at this point has lost 600,000 troops
They
dead.
lost a lot, but so is Ukraine.
Right,
And
but
Ukraine's a much smaller army.
whether they have the money or not, they're never concerned about doing what's best for the people. So I don't know if they had the money or not. I don't know if they wouldn't take food out of babies' mouths to fund this war in Ukraine. I don't have those answers. What I do know is if you open up, if you offer an olive branch to Russia, you allow them to have before the Ukraine war. That is, you allow them to have oil flowing. It's not. Zach one day texted me, "We just bombed the Houthis in Sudan," and I'm like, "Yeah, because they're going to cut off our supply routes." And he's like, here we go. Well, yeah, we may wind up at war with Iran. But I also posed the argument that we did have a peace agreement with Iran that Trump reversed, that Trump said they weren't fulfilling their agreement. They actually were. It was
They were
90%
also continuing to enrich plutonium. So that was
because
a
we're no
deal
longer in
breaker.
that agreement.
No,
But
that
when
was
we were
before.
in that
That was
agreement, they were
before.
fulfilling their part of it. They were not enriching plutonium, and we had a 90%
Well, they
verification.
told us that, but yeah.
No, no, we had UN inspectors
Yeah.
verifying. It was we were at a 90%
I
verification rate that they
I
were
But it
don't
was
at.
trust.
us to
I
give
don't trust
them
the UN
money.
as far as
Remember,
getting thrown.
because right now, you can ask Israel if that was a good deal, and they'll say we're 1,200 people dead because of that deal.
Well,
So
if you go
they gave a
back,
lot of money to give the Houthis and the Yemenis and the Hamas for tunnels and rockets and operations.
well, I can tell you this, and you can Google it. It's not me just speaking out my ass. If you Google it, you'll see that Israeli Mossad, when Trump reversed the deal, said it was a bad idea to do so.
I'd have to look that one up
You
because
can look it up right now on your phone. There was
right now, I know that they were funded. I knew that Iran did not have that 6 billion that Biden unfroze for them, and the Iran deal gave them a lot more oil revenue to be
it
able
gave them
to
a lot of money.
prosecute this war.
It gave them a lot of money, but it's another. What I said before is there's no shortage of money to wage war. What there was shortage of money in Iran was to grow their economy.
Yeah,
They
but
would
you
have
guys
waged
got to
war
buy
under any circumstance.
missiles
They
are
sponsored
expensive.
terrorism all over the world. The JPOAC, the Joint Peace Accord that Obama signed with them, kept them at bay. There was a chance we could have had a better relationship with Iran over time. And here's why. This is very ideological to believe, but it's very true. When the Ayatollah Khomeini took over Iran 50 years ago, he asked those people to grow the Persian race. He asked his people of Iran to have babies. Those babies at this point are now a lot older, they're grown ups, and they want a better relationship with the West. There was a chance of growing that opportunity with the peace agreement in place because there was a chance of them growing their economy. There's always been money in Iran to fund terrorism all around the world. That's what they do. They have the Houthis in the Sudan. They have the Kurds in Turkey. They've got all kinds of crap going on. But we did have them at some sort of a position of at bay when there was money at stake. So by pulling out of
Really
that
reminds
agreement,
me
which
of,
is one of the Trump promises I said he did keep to, but a lot of people said it's crazy you kept to it, but he did have a higher average of keeping his promises. That was one of those bad decisions to keep that promise.
well, then I'm going to ask you this though. What issues did we have with terrorism during Trump's administration? Name one thing that the Houthis, the Iranians, they were broke. They didn't affect anything in the 4 years Trump was in. You had a little bit of Syria fighting. Trump wanted them out. So very little foreign policy issues when Trump was in. So the lack of funding that Iran had did something because for years there was zero foreign wars. There was almost zero terrorism. If you
Well,
think about
In Syria,
it.
I'm just going to make this point. It's sort of a mute point, but in Syria, that was General Mattis that handled ISIS, and
Yeah,
somehow
yeah.
Trump has an
And he
issue with
actually,
him. I mean, he
well,
said,
again,
we're not playing this game anymore. We're not trying to capture him. We're going to encircle him and we're going to kill him. So it wasn't Trump.
mhm,
Like you said, presidents don't get out there and fire a gun. They put people in
yeah.
charge. He put Mattis in charge, and Mattis took care of ISIS. And somehow, after he leaves the presidency, he has some issue that Mattis was a substandard general. I disagree. And listening to that kind of verbiage coming from him is kind of annoying.
Yeah, but you're
It's
going to get that if you read history, Trippy. I'm not insulting your intelligence because you're probably a historical guy like me. There's you won't find a presidential administration where guys in the cabinet and even their military guys they didn't get in little arguments or disagreements. It happens all the time. Trump's is amplified because of all the propaganda. Yeah, there's plenty of guys who didn't get along with their military guys and their cabinet.
I've just never seen it to this level. I've never seen the
Oh, there's so much
disrespect.
bad. Yeah, the vitriol on the media. I mean, if it wasn't for Elon getting X, Twitter, some of these, I'm trying to think of the exact word. Some of these debunked hoaxes which went on forever, like the Charlottesville thing, the some of the things that they said he said about the loser. That was bull crap. Now that Elon's on there and he allows all input, they can't keep this propaganda. They keep get. I've never seen a president get this kind of I mean, Bush caught a little bit of that was the most I've ever seen. Was George W. Bush? He caught a lot of flack, but I've never seen the changed headlines, the clickbait, the omitted stories. The big problem with our media is not what they report; it's what they don't. Trump got on many a times during the campaign, and they cut him off on other stations. So we're at a point with technology now and Google searches. You can't find a positive one on Trump. You can find a million on her. I mean,
I heard it's
right now,
Alexa too.
yeah,
That's
it's
Alexa too.
stuff that whenever I'm a libertarian. I'm supposed to never worship a president because I listen to my hero, Thomas Jefferson, who's my favorite forefather ever, who hated the central government, hated the federal government, was and that's I'm not to each everybody. I'm not a real religious guy like you guys. So up but you know, but I you know I've been studying a long time, but I've never seen this kind of bias, this kind of corrupt media that's going on right now. Again, somebody comes with Fox News. Let me tell you what, straight up, if Fox does something stupid, I say it. I'm not a president worshiper. They're Fox. They actually were so used to the left news. Fox is almost squared away right now. Watching them, they get on. They say both sides. They at least put on Biden when he has press conferences. The other stations don't even put the sitting president on when he had a press conference. I mean, you're talking about something bigger than we all know right now. I feel like there's a coup or there's some sort of issue going on. that's bigger than we really know. Because
So
I've
I gotta
never.
say, I probably agree with you on most of those points. You know what I will say though? I'm just gonna add this in there. It's a segue, but it's one worth mentioning. Do you know what I? Do you know how I feel thinking out loud? How Elon Musk, why Elon Musk bought Twitter, and he's called it. He says he's bought the most expensive $40 billion non-profit organization in the world. And you know what I feel it is? Because go back in history and remember what happened to John DeLorean. He was a star in the auto industry. He decided to leave General Motors and start his own motor company. And the federal government was so concerned about his abilities that they set him up with a drug deal that would save his company and then shut him down and put him in prison and then acquitted him because it was entrapment. And Elon Musk saw that happening to him, and that's why he bought a social media network that he could, the only one that was on the block. I mean, it wasn't, Yahoo was already gone and scooped up over
Yeah,
Verizon.
but you got one thing trippy about. Sorry for interrupting, but the one thing about Twitter is, and now X, is that drives the narrative of the news of the day, which is a very important point.
Right.
Twitter, so it used to run with, guys were shadowed and censored. So people believe things that were untrue for years on it, like the COVID stuff, the misinformation on McCullough and the doctors with their Mectin stuff, with the Vax info. So there's a lot of stuff. Elon opened the platform. So now,
Oh, did you freeze? You froze, Jonathan.
You
We
froze,
lost
John.
you. Hold
Can you
on.
fix that?
I'll text him.
control the
There he
narrative as
is.
much. Something stupid because yeah, it
We
used to be one message to everything.
we lost you for a minute, buddy. You froze up, but that's okay. I mean, we got the point.
Oh, yeah, go
It must be past your internet's bedtime, also.
ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Well, how is North
You got me
Carolina?
now?
Is it recovering from the storm?
Right, I got you guys back. Yeah, yeah. Now
How
I
is
just
North
started
Carolina? Are
hearing
you
you
guys
again,
recovering
guys.
from the
Yeah. All right,
storm?
now we're back. Yeah, and really on the east side of North Carolina, we were fine. It was really the west towards Tennessee that caught everything.
Yeah.
Asheville's a good 4 hours from me.
Oh,
So
good. So you're
yeah.
set. You're okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm near Wake Forest, Raleigh, east side, north towards Virginia.
Are you in the
So I didn't.
Golden Triangle?
Yeah, oh, yeah, I'm right in the triangle, which is I used to be right in the middle of it near Raleigh, but now I'm out up past Wake Forest. I took advantage
Oh, I just
of
Yeah.
Biden running in like two houses, jumping, get 8 acres up in Wake Forest because the government was handing out free money.
that's a
Right?
beautiful
Why do you
thing. I
think
wish I
black
knew about that.
All right. Um,
21 it was right around 21, right when right after they signed what their American Rescue debauchery that tried what 3.5 trillion that drove us to inflation.
I'm actually a fan of that. That was called what was that called? The Inflation Reduction Act, right? The IRA?
the IRA, hey, it's the
No,
Irish Republican Army.
So Zachy, what's going on, man?
oh, that
Nothing.
was a different one. Trippy. It's a different one.
Hey,
That's the recent one.
The first one was the infrastructure bill. I forget what they called it, but it was an infrastructure bill.
No, they did the American. Remember, thank God Manchin knocked it down. They 3.5 trillion cut it to one
Oh, it
billion.
never got to that though. It was passed under 700 billion. That's the IRA. That's the
Yeah,
Inflation Reduction Act.
yeah. They also did the American Rescue Plan after Trump was $1 trillion bill cut down every business. So they had to drop that bill. They had to drop 3 trillion at the end of Trump's term because they shut down the economy that he didn't want to do.
Well, here's the thing about whether it's a tax cut of $1.5 trillion or it's a infrastructure bill of $1.5 trillion. It's cash infusion into the economy. It's a different way to look at it. It's a different perspective of how you feel about it. But generally speaking, that kind of money is cash infusion into the economy that gets the economy going. So whoever is president, Zach had great prosperity under the Trump years. That was the worst 4 years of my life, and I've never really had tremendous prosperity. So I've never been a fan of presidential economic policies. Maybe Reagan. I wasn't even working. I was a kid when he was president. I wouldn't know, but
See what happened when you left your Jewish roots? You went broke.
I don't
Anyway,
know. I can honestly say I never felt the prosperity that people keep talking about under Trump. I never had that prosperity.
Got you now.
oh
I lost you for a little bit there, Trippy. Uh, you guys hear me now? You got,
yeah,
Yeah.
you just came back. You're good. But
yeah,
we were just saying
Trippy.
it was. Look,
Yeah, I heard.
I prospered with Trump. You didn't. But I will say, under the Biden administration, I've made really good money, but it's also been the brokest I've been.
Well, that's because of inflation, but I
That's
think
from
we lost
Obama.
on.
It's Obama's fault.
Do we lose?
Yeah. We're
We
losing
got
and
it back?
fading. We're fading. You're fading in and out, John. So
Yeah,
why don't we wrap this up?
yeah.
We'll
Trippy, one thing about what you're saying, you guys hear me?
yes.
Trippy, that the one thing I got to disagree with you on is you said that dropping that government money into the economy is a good thing. Well, it's printing excess money is what gets us into inflation in the first place. It's free market that really makes our economy drive, letting free market produce revenue and not the government putting money into the economy. Because the more money we print, the less valuable that cash is, and the less production you get out of society. And then we have a supply issue, which we ran into. So you keep printing all that money and putting it is not a good thing. That's so that
I'll tell
American,
you
yeah,
what's
they just shouldn't have shut the government down. That's what they shouldn't have done. That's illegal and unconstitutional. You can't shut it. There's nothing legal about shutting anybody's business down. I don't care what kind of quote unquote emergency it is. Our forefathers never clause in the Constitution to where there's an emergency. There was no constitution anymore because you know what a tyrant would do? He would create an emergency, just
Right.
like they did during the scamdemic.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, I want
So
to
you
say,
can't.
the most beautiful thing about this today is two conservatives versus a sort of center right guy, and we only disagreed on one point. So there's hope.
Trippy, you're definitely a very sensible guy when it comes. You're not a lefty that I'm used to. You're more of an old. You're an old school liberal, with which I respect. I respect anybody that could articulate their views, even if I think they're wrong. It still shows genuinity. But somebody that just like a Kamala Harris that will not talk, will not say her views, will hide, especially somebody like that. I don't respect that at all, and she's fake as hell. I just like genuinity, and you're like a Mar or somebody, an old school liberal. You're definitely not a leftist. There's a big
No,
difference.
not at all. But
I actually think you're what did I say? You were a Kennedy Democrat.
Yeah, which is actually a conservative nowadays.
Yeah.
the only thing about when I get called a Kennedy Democrat is I think the most foul people on this earth are Kennedys. So
Yeah,
it's not.
they weren't the greatest people in the world.
No,
I've literally got
but hey,
hospitality friends that live out that way, and I'm not going to say their names, but who say they literally will not go to work in the resorts if the Kennedys are there. So
what would you rather be a Kennedy Democrat or a Clinton Democrat?
I'm not. Okay, so let's go down to as far as Kennedys and Clintons being foul, I can't even tell you who's better or worse.
Yeah.
So I would say what I am, and I actually would love to make this point. I love when people say Jimmy Carter was a great Christian but a terrible president. I love the fact that we had a great Christian as a president. And I loved him and I loved his policies. And I loved the fact that for 4 years we didn't fire a single shot. and
Yeah,
that
but
was
we had 444 days of terrorists. I mean, of terrorist
well.
kidnapping guys.
I don't disagree with that. That was handled, but the fact of the matter is, we should have moved in. And he did send in a mission. It was a terrible, sad loss. The mission went awful, but
And then the best
every
president stepped
single
in and handled
president
business.
makes
Oh
mistakes.
yeah, yeah, Zach. And by the way, what happened 30 minutes after he raised his right hand? What happened? The
No, but
check.
you know, there's Jimmy Carter even said, and Ronald Reagan even said, I give Jimmy Carter all the credit. Actually, Jimmy Carter was a humble man, but he did say he slept on the couch in the Oval Office for the last 30 days of his presidency negotiating that deal. So,
And let
as
me tell
much
you
as,
what.
like you said, I'm not going to argue the point that 30 minutes after Ronald Reagan was sworn in, the hostages were released. But the fact of the matter is, the deal was negotiated by Jimmy Carter. There is no way that the deal was
No,
negotiated
no, you
in
you
30
you got to
minutes.
give
And
him credit, but Reagan
No, they
handled
were
business.
afraid of Reagan. They were afraid of what
I
Reagan was going to do.
don't doubt it, but I don't doubt that the 30 days of effort that led to success was due to the fact that they knew Reagan was on the way. But here's the simple fact: Jimmy Carter negotiated the deal.
So
That's,
on that note, let's look at something real quick, and then we're gonna wrap this up. But let's touch base on this. I'm a evil dictator, Putin, Ayatollah, whatever. Am I sweating if Trump's getting in office, or am I laughing if Kamala gets in office?
well, I'm only going to
There,
say this, and I use this example. I don't know if you ever watched the show before. I'm just going to say I heard all the rhetoric about North Korea from Trump. I got a bigger button. I got a bigger button. I got a bigger button on my desk than you do. Otto Warmbier, a college student that was arrested in North Korea. And let me just tell you why he was arrested, because I don't know. I'm sure you know why. I'm sure Zach knows why, but I don't know if anybody watching this show knows why. He was arrested because he was staying in a hotel that was tourists were allowed to stay in a very controlled visitor program. You're staying in a hotel. He went to a floor of the hotel that is only employees only. He took a banner down as a souvenir. He was arrested. He was visibly tortured, according to his father, not according to fake news. It looked like they had pulled his teeth out with pliers. He was sent here in a wakeful, comatose something term, had no hopes of living, and he died 4 days later. The retaliatory action that was taken by Donald Trump, that would frighten every dictator in the world, including Kim Jong Un, was Donald Trump flew Air Force One, landed at nearby the DMZ, visited Kim Jong Un, and shook a North Korean general's hand. So let's go back on precedent, sharing
Well,
best practices. When Gaddafi terrorist bombed an Italian disco, a disco in Italy, and that was known to be frequented by American military, Ronald Reagan responded by bombing Libya and ultimately killing his child, which I do not advocate, but it was a strong message that squashed Gaddafi's terrorist ambitions for the rest of his living career.
let me throw
So,
this
as
at
far
you.
as
Let me
terrorists, or no, as far as dictators being scared of Donald Trump, I don't see the fear that some people feel that he conveys. I
so
see
I'm gonna
weakness,
I'm gonna I'm gonna
and the
squash that for
weakness
real
is
quick.
he's a big talker and a small actioner.
I'm gonna squash that because I know
ask
that's your thought.
Soleimani about that action, though. Ask Soleimani about that.
Right,
Who
and that's
I had a,
if
I
you're
had a, I saw guys personally get blown up because of Soleimani in Iraq. Trump took him out, and that was about the only. So he talked about Iran, don't mess around, and when Soleimani, he got him. So I mean, I think they were. I mean, really look at what happened. There's no American troops in Afghanistan killed during Trump's last year in office. They basically had he's throughout the world signed the Abraham Accords, which just helped Israel right now when Iran, because Jordan was obligated to help shoot down the missiles due to the Abraham Accords. So Trump's foreign policy was, I mean, he was known. I mean, there's
well, the
argument about how great his
But
acumen was in foreign policy.
Trippy, let me touch base with you on the North Korean thing. To me, And John, we grew up in Jersey. We grew up around the mob. You grew up in New York around, you saw that. The most threatening thing a guy could do to me, the cowardly way was Molotov cocktail in a bar full of people, right? The tough guy would walk into the bar and walk right up to the Don and shake his hand and let him know, I ain't scared of you. And that's what he did. Straight up. He stepped over. No other president has ever stepped into North Korea. He walked
That was
in there,
symbolic.
shook his hand, and said, I'm the boss.
That's not the response North Korea should have gotten. I
No,
disagree. And
no,
like I said, now we've
I don't,
disagreed
I don't
twice,
think,
which isn't
I
bad for an
don't
hour and a half
think,
show.
but listen, I don't think, look, it was horrible that the kid got beat up and tortured and all that stuff,
And
right?
killed.
I don't think that we should just start a war over that because Kim Jong Un is a whack job, and he's the pajama guy who's going to push the button.
Yeah.
He's going to say, "Okay, you want
And
to
you know
show yours?
what?
I'm going to show mine."
Well,
So
one thing
Trump went over there. Probably, we don't know what conversation they had. We don't know what they talked about. And all I can tell you, while Trump was in office, the pajama madman stayed in his
Uh,
house and kept his mouth
I was
shut.
gonna I was gonna say that, Zach. You brought up the point. I
Yeah.
was just gonna answer that. You're right. He didn't act up either when Trump was in. It was very surreal the way the world was because 12 out of the last 16 years we've had Democrat presidents, and the only four of them that there was a Republican that was the only four that nobody made any progress in the world. I mean, under Obama, they took the Crimea, they took the Donetsk region of
But
so
you're making my point that they shouldn't have been able to take the Crimea, and then you go right back to we're funding Ukraine defending themselves from taking anything else. I mean, it's got to go one way or the other.
yeah, but
Russia
we
rolled
didn't
into
dump money.
Crimea.
Obama didn't dump money over there. In fact, he didn't even give them lethal weapons for the war again when Russia took the Crimea. Trump's administration actually started giving Ukraine viable weapons
Right.
even before the attack.
Not, I'm not saying Obama handled it correctly. What I'm
Uh,
saying is Biden handling it correctly now. I'm
Biden,
asking the question.
Biden, look, remember the press conference where he said, well, if they don't go in too far, he
Apparently, they went in too far. Crimea was pretty far.
yeah, well, he didn't give any remember the press conference where he said when they knew Russia was going to attack, it was at the point, and Biden didn't do anything to stop them. They said for 3 months on that DMZ. They said for 3 months on the border of Ukraine, and Biden didn't even hold talks, and the UN didn't hold to try to stop. Have never allowed that to happen on his
Because
watch.
frankly, war is a racket. Because if you want to talk about that, let's
For
go back to the
Democrats,
first
it
Gulf.
is.
Let's
Yeah.
go back to the first Gulf War. Saddam Hussein was amassing troops on the Kuwaiti border for over a year, and
Yeah.
George Bush called it posturing, and everybody said you're an idiot. He's going to roll into Kuwait.
Yeah,
It's
but
not
we actually put
posturing.
troops in. We actually immediately responded with a buildup of troops. We
After
didn't
he
fight
rolled
yet.
in, but there was no
Yeah.
response while he was amassing the troops on that border. When he rolled into Kuwait is when we started Desert Shield. But
Yeah.
we knew the whole time he was moving his entire forces to that Kuwaiti border. We knew he was going to roll into Iraq. He had made it clear throughout his career that he considered Iraq his.
Yeah, but
Yeah, well, I mean,
here's I'm going to play devil's advocate real
He,
quick.
Kuwait was his. He had made it clear throughout his career that Kuwait was his.
I'll play devil's advocate real quick on this one. Would you want to be the president that sat back and watched to see what they were doing strategically and then stepped in when you had to? When the bully started to strike with a big stick, you stepped in and stopped it. Or would you want to pull the trigger and then all of a sudden you started a war? I mean, that's got to be
Well,
a
to
tough
that
call.
point,
That's got to be a tough call.
and then we're
that
dumping our
war,
future money into it. We're
that
dumping
war
our great
was
kids. Yeah.
that war was a money train.
Well, just like
War was a
Ukraine
money
is. And
train.
I'm sorry, Ukraine is known to be the number one money
Yep.
laundering country in the world.
100%. It's
No, the only reason
the
I
most
mentioned Ukraine just now is because we said Obama didn't do nothing when Russia rolled into Crimea. They took over Crimea. They built a bridge that connected Crimea with Russia. We never did anything about that. Then suddenly the
They
contradiction
weren't
is,
NATO, though. They're not NATO. We're not obligated.
but
And there's
the only thing I was pointing out, not disagreeing or agreeing, I'm just saying now that Biden is really, and we're not sending our troops over there, we're just sending money over there, and we're really able to identify Russia's abilities, and the identification process is proving their abilities are zero. So it's really a research and development project as far as I'm concerned. And the research and
a lot of
development is
money.
showing we're
That's a
on the
lot of
right
print.
track, we're on the wrong
That's a lot
track.
of printed money. That's
Yeah, why
you're
don't
gonna
we print
Right,
that
great
money
but
and
grandkids. Yeah.
it has a national self-defense value.
Now we're
I
giving away. We drained the global our global supply of freaking fuel that Trump wanted could filled up on pennies of the dollar. That Schumer stuff, but that's a whole other issue. But
That's the Keystone Pipeline.
no. We drained the strategic reserve.
Well, they
Biden during the election, he drained the reserve during the midterms, so he brought prices down artificially. And now we can't fill up our strategic reserve. It's down like 60%.
oh, is it
For
down still? Because I was under the impression it was coming way back up. But
well,
I
Trump, yeah, but they because the gas got too expensive. So it costs, and Congress has to pass that. We have
okay,
to.
I'm not. I know he did. I know he did release the National Reserve to bring down fuel prices. I don't agree. I didn't agree with the Keystone Pipeline decision either. It was political, and I've said that.
That
I
was
can say
terrible.
when I disagree
It was
with
terrible.
Biden.
Yeah, yeah. Again, Trippy, you know you sound very reasonable to me. I mean, I,
that's
yeah, but
that's
you're
why
pushing.
our
Yeah,
show is a success because we're not
yeah.
screaming at each other. And I mean, we get a little loud every once in a while, but it's just
No,
we
we've never
Trippy and
gotten
we've
loud,
known
have
each other
we?
what 29 years, right, Trip?
Yeah, over.
Wow,
Like
Hey,
I
man.
said,
Trip,
I mean, this is nearly 2 hours of pretty much two very conservative people and a not so liberal center right. But
yeah.
I'm definitely do have some liberal beliefs in me.
She's gonna, you know that where that she gets. I'm gonna tell you straight up. Here's my prediction. She wins somehow. First of all, take it from me. Already, our military numbers are down to next to nothing because the patriots that joined the military have not been under this administration. It takes a leader, to have good recruiting in the military. So what happens is we're down. She wins this election. You're going to have almost nobody join our military. They're not going to be able to make our numbers. So what's going to happen is every illegal you see right now, the Chinese, everyone sitting in our country, they're going to put them in our military, give them citizenship, and now you have a disloyal to the Constitution military that'll work on the president's whim. Mark my word. If Trump wins, all those illegals aren't going to be put in the military. They're going to be wrecking cities every week. So there's my two predictions. That's just John Lapidow talking. But
Well, I love the predictions. I'm just going to say I don't disagree at all or agree. I don't know. But I will say this. I always say this somewhere in the show. Whoever wins won unfair and unsquare because both parties cheat and both parties lie and both
I
parties.
watched ballots getting stuffed. I literally watched hundreds of thousands of ballots getting stuffed for Biden in that 2020 election. That's probably a whole new podcast to talk about the 2020
Yeah,
election.
Well,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely yes.
we're
yeah,
I
definitely
we
want
gonna
to
have
hear
to
all
have
we
it
about
back.
it. I want to hear
yeah,
all about it.
the anomalies alone, if you know presidential history, the anomalies alone in that election, i.e., Trump gaining 10 million votes from his previous bellwether counties, winning Ohio and Florida, the anomalies alone, they're tell straight up, regardless of there's Floyd.
Well, I
If
would
there's
say a Republican winning Florida is not really an anomaly, but
Well, when my point was if a Republican wins Florida and Ohio, they win every election. And if they gain any incumbent that gains any additional votes from his previous election, they never lose an election. Trump gained 10 million, and anybody that wins the bellwether counties, the 16 bellwether counties, wins every election. Trump won all those and didn't. So all I'm saying is you don't have to be a pilot to know a plane in a tree is a bad thing. So right.
no, but
So
I'll just say on the 10 million figure, that 10 million election figure is also going hand in hand with 160 million voters, which has never been reached before and probably will never be reached again.
Yeah, well,
We've always
vote
had a
ballots.
maximum.
That I'm going to correct you there, Trippy. 160 million ballots, not 160 million
Oh,
people.
well,
People
this is
voted.
really a whole nother
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Let's
I'm
let's
with
do
you.
this on another
Yeah,
show because
We can do
definitely.
this again though. I'll do it
Yeah,
every
yeah,
week.
it's
I'll do it
great.
every day if I didn't have a full-time job. I love this. So
Well, I'm retired, so like I said, you guys got me after my bedtime, man. I'm usually in bed watching the TV with the wife and three schnauzers by now.
there you
well,
go.
the good news is you can do it all over tomorrow. You're retired. I'm not even going to be here tomorrow
Yeah.
for the rest
That's
of
I
the
just
right.
got well, I actually work at the range, Trippy. Look, see YGC. I'll give him a shout out here.
There you go.
YG.
heck yeah.
Yeah, I instruct at firearms at my range. So it's my I work basically wherever my clients part time. But I go I'm there at least every day, every other day. So it gets me out of the house.
That's
That's
right. And I'm
beautiful.
gonna I'm gonna be taking a trip up to Fort Lap here to get my
Oh,
ARs
definitely.
sighted in and get a nice scope on it
Yeah.
and maybe get a suppressor.
Hey, Trippy, you're welcome too.
Well, you
I'll even
should.
I'll
You
let
have every
Trippy
right
pass on
to.
the Patriot clause. Zach, I have a Patriot clause. The lefties aren't allowed on Fort Lap, but
Well, I'm allowed, so I'm not
yeah,
worried
well,
I'll
about
then
it.
be
Trippy,
received with open arms if I happen to show up with Zach.
yeah, you come up, I'll train you too, Trip.
I, I will greatly appreciate that.
We'll have
Yeah.
some fun for sure.
Oh,
But hey,
definitely.
I just got to give a shout out to our guest tonight, John, retired Lieutenant Colonel John Lapidow. Thank you, brother, for your service.
Thank you,
I
John. Thank you for your
great
service.
talking
Thank
to
you
you.
for doing our show. You were a pleasure.
It was,
I'm
yeah, this has
glad.
been a
Yeah,
great show. I want to
glad
thank
to do
all
it.
our guests who always come on and just every week we seem to have better and better shows and better chats and you know, maybe one day we'll get Trippy over to the dark side. But I want to give a
We're
shout out to
working on it.
everybody. I want to give a shout out to
Don't
everybody
stop.
listening. A big shout out to everybody listening. Thank you very much. We love you. We appreciate you. Huge shout out to our guest last week, Derek, and Turbo Tint of Orlando, who did an amazing job on my
He's
wife's
incredible
car.
too.
Oh, my
And
wife's
don't
car
forget
looks
LA
spectacular.
Zach. We need her back.
Yeah, she'll be back. She's our most frequented guest. Shout
Nice.
out to our
And
other guest, Daniel Quijano, who's going to come back on.
Pastor
I think we're
Joe.
going to have a good, we'll have to have like six on one night. We'll have Jonathan or John and Lorianne and Daniel.
Pastor Joe Mano.
Oh my gosh, we'll get everybody on.
Let's do
Anyway,
this. Let's plan
everybody,
this. Let's
thanks for
get some
listening.
invites out.
Thanks
Let's
for
figure it
listening.
out.
Thanks for being here tonight, John. And as we say every week, peace.
Peace. Thanks, guys.
Peace. Peace.